we can tell our story about how we climbed the ladder, and a lot of you younger women don't think you have to. It's been done. It's not done, and you have to help. Hillary Clinton will always be there for you, and just remember, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
We also need to strip away the immunity that that Senator Sanders, I hope not President Sanders.
Chelsea Clinton was in the Twin Cities Wednesday, fundraising for her mother Hillary Clinton ahead of Minnesota's caucuses. It was an honest slip, but it could also be a sign the Clinton campaign is feeling a little pressure. Bernie Sanders just narrowly lost to Hillary Clinton in Iowa's Democratic caucus, and a Real Clear Politics poll put Sanders up by almost 17% in New Hampshire ahead of the primary.
When you're young, you're thinking, where are the boys? The boys are with Bernie, or,
Ooh. Now, if I said that...
No.
Yeah, they're for Bernie, because that's where the boys are.
But it's
swap
not...
me. Come on.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Okay, so Steinem later apologized for that remark, but you also had former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. She said there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other. Younger women don't like to be patronized. Are these comments hurting?
Well, look, both of these women have been first in their careers, and obviously they have strong feelings. I've heard former Secretary Albright talk about that a number of times before. They have very strong feelings about it. But I just want you to point out, I mean, these are two women. Obviously, they're supporting Hillary. But, we're not accountable. We can't control what they say, obviously.
But you can disavow
Senator
what they
Sanders
say, Karen. You can disavow what they say, because they seem to be pitting the older generation of women against the younger, and that's never a good thing, frankly.
But Carol...
But shouldn't Hillary Clinton come out and totally disavow what Gloria Steinem and Madeleine Albright said?
Well, look, she talked about it yesterday, as you know, in an interview, in a couple of interviews, actually. And, I mean, again, these are women who are, passionate advocates. They support Hillary Clinton. We can't really control what they say. And again, this is how
they feel. But again, you can disavow what they say
about having a woman president.
Good evening to you. Hillary and Bill Clinton frustrated by their inability to close the gap with Bernie Sanders, especially with young women. And they're running out of time.
I'm looking forward to it. I need some fuel.
Hillary Clinton never thought she'd be on the losing side of a gender gap. But young women are abandoning her in droves for Bernie Sanders, a 74-year-old man.
She seems a little old-fashioned with feminism. I don't vote with my femininity. I vote with logical reason.
Go back to 1986 to the Vermont gubernatorial race when Bernie Sanders challenged our guest, Madeleine Kunin, the sitting governor at the time of Vermont. During the campaign, Sanders and Kunin appeared together during a call-in show on C-SPAN.
What we know right now is that wealthy people and corporations in the state of Vermont are paying less than they paid 5 years ago in combined state and federal taxes. We know that homeowners and poor people are paying significantly more in property taxes. So what you're seeing in the state of Vermont is an interesting tax situation. Wealthy people, corporations paying less in personal and corporate income tax, homeowners, low-income people paying more in property taxes. What we are proposing is serious tax reform, which both Governor Kunin and Lieutenant Governor Smith are running away from. We are saying, and will demonstrate, that in point of fact, we can lower the property tax burden on homeowners in the state by 20%. We can significantly increase state aid to education far more than what the governor is talking about. And we can do this without having anybody in the state of Vermont, not the richest person in the state of Vermont, paying more in combined state and federal taxes than they paid 5 years ago. I think that's the direction we should go. But we're going to have the guts to create a tax system here in the state of Vermont and not let Washington make the tax laws for us.
Hold you there, Governor Kunin.
Let me just add one very important note. This administration is going to enable the state of Vermont to have the biggest tax cut in its history, $20 million, as a result of getting rid of the surcharge that we enacted earlier, because we retired the deficit and lived within our means. Now, the mayor talks about $300 million, simply getting that from the corporations and the rich. That's a mythology. There aren't those kinds of corporations. There aren't those kinds of rich people. Those are Vermonters who pay those taxes, and they're middle-income Vermonters. So it's easy to talk in theory and pinpoint evil at some distant place, but the Vermont economy, the Vermont taxpayer, isn't made up that way. You would be taking that money out of the pockets of Vermonters. It isn't done with blue smoke and mirrors.
This issue of income inequality has been Bernie Sanders' issue for decades. He has not wavered. In fact, Governor Kunin, this issue is certainly one that has affected Hillary Clinton's campaign as she changes her rhetoric around income inequality because of Bernie Sanders' to many surprising surge in the polls.
Well, it is a familiar tune, as you could see by that clip. And Bernie hasn't changed his tune, but what has happened is that the times have become even more unequal, so it has more resonance. But, you know, you got to get the money from somewhere. And I haven't changed my tune either. I agree with what he says in principle, but how do you make it a reality? You know, how do we have an effective president of the United States? The word revolution is beautiful. You know, I'd like a revolution myself.
Secretary Clinton has Bill, but I have a more potent force, my wife, Jane.
But Jane Sanders has become a force all her own on the campaign trail and even on TV.
Sweetie, I can't believe how many people are here.
It's a revolution, Jane.
From the flatbed of a truck at 5 a.m. in the morning after the Iowa caucuses.
Honestly, Jane and I.
To campaigning in the snow. She's been on the trail seemingly wherever Bernie goes.
Well, you just heard the brains in the family.
They grew up only blocks away from each other in Brooklyn.
We played stickball out every day or dodgeball, and we hung out on the stoop.
She worked as a bank teller, raised 3 kids, and a self-avowed deadhead dreamed of Vermont.
I went to Woodstock.
Okay, well, that's incredible.
She finally intersected with Bernie Sanders in Burlington on the eve of his election as mayor back in 1981. Together, they worked to improve the city and the lives of children, however they could.
We started a youth office, which started after-school programs for kids, started a child care center. She led that effort.
She had been a foster parent. How many foster kids did you have?
13.
13,
Over
not
time.
to mention her own 3 kids. And she got me thinking a whole lot about the needs of children and youth.
But she didn't stop there. She became the provost of Goddard College. In 2004, she became president of Burlington College, and at 50, went back to school.
They said, you need a PhD, you need to continue to do this work, let us help you get that. So I went back and I got my PhD at 50.
She was her husband's chief of staff and policy advisor in Congress, working a reported 70 hours a week and helping write some 50 pieces of legislation. But even Jane Sanders was unconvinced that the national stage was the right one for her husband.
Ego and arrogance is not Bernie's go-to place. I mean, his thing is service. He says, I don't want to do it unless you're 100% there. And over walks a veteran and he says, I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you how much I support you and I want to thank you. You got me my benefits. After 30 years, I will do anything that I can if you run for president because we need you. So I got up, I gave the guy a hug, tears in my eyes, and I just said, I give up. You have to do it, I guess.
From LA to Boston, Des Moines to Maine, this cycle, Jane Sanders has been a mainstay on the trail, reviewing campaign ads and helping out with debate prep.
This is Bernie's wife. Thank you for coming.
And now, nobody frames the contrast in the presidential race better than she can.
We have exit poll information about this Sanders victory tonight. This is very interesting. According to our NBC News exit poll, key groups of voters supporting Bernie Sanders tonight included 85% of millennials, 72% of independents voting in the Democratic Party, 2/3 of gun owners, and those who say they are very liberal. Just an incredible incredible collection of different data points for Bernie Sanders.
The Bernie Sanders-Hillary Clinton split is it's more like an ideological squiggle than it is a straight liberal versus moderate or liberal versus, they tried to make this fight over who was a progressive and who wasn't. You see in the gun owner number being right next to the very liberal number that it is very hard to parse the different types of electorates that each of these candidates appeal to. In the debate that Chuck and I moderated this past week, they had that incredibly hot fight over what it means to be a progressive and who has the right to be called a progressive. And then for Sanders to be winning very liberal and gun owners, I don't know if they're going to keep having that fight, but boy, is that a lot of grist for the mill if they're going to.
And remember the E word getting thrown around, establishment.
Yeah.
That was almost spat out when it was mentioned.
Right, and on a night that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are the two winners in the New Hampshire primary, the idea of the establishment, I think, could be safely thrown away and dug back up in 100 years to see if it's still ticking.
I think so. Andrea Mitchell, you have something?
Oh, just the fact that Bernie Sanders is winning the women's vote. I don't just mean the young women's vote. According to the exit polls, he's winning the women's vote so far.
Not just that he's doing a better than expected number with women, but he's actually winning more women voters than Clinton
Now,
is.
according to our decision desk, the exit poll shows that he's winning the women's vote 53 to 46, according to the exit poll.
Well, that could be a sign of a shift in the gender dynamics in the race, or that could be the sign of a Sanders landslide. Because when you win by a huge margin, you win everybody. You end up winning every demographic.
Ed, go back to 92 and 2008. New Hampshire's been very good to the Clintons. Not this year. This was a really, she lost every demographic.
Right, and it was a drubbing because I was on the ground today with some of the Clinton volunteers and advisors in Nashua, and what they were saying to me privately off camera was, look, Bernie Sanders has had a big lead. We just want to get this down to a loss of single digits. Let it be 5 points, 6 points. Slow the Bernie momentum. Instead, it's not complete yet, but with something like 92% in, it's a 20, 21-point drubbing for Hillary Clinton. So they did not close the gap. And you're right. Look, the Clinton camp has been trying to lower expectations by saying Bernie Sanders is from the neighboring state of Vermont. Well, as you note, Bill Clinton did quite well here. Didn't win, but came in second and became the comeback kid in 92. And then Hillary Clinton, after losing Iowa, coming in third in 08, won here. So it has been kind to the Clintons, and it wasn't this time. Quickly, I'll run through some of the other numbers you mentioned. Hillary Clinton took a hit on who do you, does being honest and trustworthy matter to you? 70, 80% went to Sanders. That shows that there's an ethical drag here. Young people, 80, 85% going to Bernie Sanders. That's an enthusiasm problem for Hillary Clinton. And then finally, independents went big, 70, 80% for Bernie Sanders. So even if Hillary Clinton limps through and gets the nomination, she has a real problem maybe in the general election with independents. On the positive side,
yes, Sean, first of all, Sean, let me just say congratulations to Senator Sanders. He ran a terrific campaign there in New Hampshire, and it was really great to see the enthusiasm and the record votes turn out. One of the things that's great about these highly contested primaries like you're seeing is the overwhelming, turnout that you're seeing both on the Republican and the Democratic side. So kudos to Senator Sanders tonight for a great win. But going forward, you're going to see a much more diverse electorate, as we've all talked about, as you all have mentioned here tonight. So it isn't going to be the same. You had Iowa and New Hampshire that geared a lot more liberal than the rest of the country. You have a lot more diversified, and you have, Hillary Clinton that has already operations on the ground. So I think it's not all lost. One state does not make the nomination, as we see. Only 2% of the electorate is in.
And that's Hillary does not have a likability factor. And when 60% of the electorate overall thinks that you're a liar and dishonest and untrustworthy, as many polls have pointed out, how does that person get elected to the White House?
Well, and you also see in many times polls after polls that she has the experience to lead this country. That is
You're not addressing my question, though.
Of leadership that they want. So there's many factors that go into who they choose to vote for.
Well, Penny,
and so there's different factors, whether it be experience, whether it be leadership or other things. So Mrs. Clinton is going to put on a very dogged race going forward.
If 60% of the electorate thinks you're dishonest and untrustworthy, how do you win?
Now, as Bernie Sanders continues to gain on Hillary Clinton, and the two latest national polls have him trailing only by 2 points and 3 points, having completely caught up to an overwhelming Hillary Clinton lead. Just a couple of months ago, she had a 40-point lead nationally. Gone. Now, she leads in some states. Bernie Sanders is probably going to win easily in New Hampshire tonight. They pretty much tied. She won by about 0.2% in Iowa. So obviously, this is a very, very close race. And as I told you on this show, if Bernie Sanders catches Hillary Clinton, the mainstream establishment, especially the establishment media, will flip out. And they will launch an attack against Bernie Sanders, the likes of which you have never seen. You know the old adage, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Well, we're on to the fighting part. We've already dispensed with ignoring, which they did in the earlier part of the campaign, and you saw it very clearly. Then we got to the laughing. Democratic Socialists, come on. Most liberal member of the Senate. No. That he tied in Iowa and is leading in New Hampshire. Now we've gotten to stage 3. They fight you. Unsurprisingly, Wall Street Journal, they've got Wall Street in their name, with a spirited defense of Wall Street and against Bernie Sanders.
Now, I have been criticized during this campaign for many, many things. Every single day. That's okay. That's all right. They're throwing everything at me except the kitchen sink, and I have the feeling that kitchen sink is coming pretty soon as well. But what our campaign is about is thinking big, not small. It's about having the courage to reject the status quo. It's about saying that in a time when every major country on earth guarantees health care to all of their people, we should be doing the same in our great country.
Yeah, obviously they're polarized, they're whiter, but then they're also more polarized. What's interesting to me is this electorate, according to the exit polls, are more polarized than they were in 08. The Democrats are much more liberal, significantly more liberal than they were in 08. The Republicans are significantly more, who say they are extremely conservative than in 12 and 08. So there's an electorate, like a lot of people around the country, who have polarized. I'm also struck by how many late deciders there are. If it's half late deciders, that means all that we've been talking about in the polls. I'd be very surprised if we weren't very surprised by what happens in the next few hours.
Mark, what about that, the late deciders and also the difference? Well, let me ask you first about the late deciders. What does that tell you?
The late deciders tell me that it's typical New Hampshire. We get, in the last 72 hours, 48 hours, you get up to half of the voters deciding. And one measurement I saw reported is that 2/3 of the voters said that the debates, which were last Thursday for the Democrats, last Saturday for the Republicans, influenced their decision in that late decision. So I think that will be a major part of the postmortem of the results tonight.
And Mark, what about this question of what are you looking for the results in New Hampshire to clarify? I mean, this is a different group of voters from the rest of the country.
It's a different group of voters, Judy. It has always been a different group of voters. It is the gateway and the gatekeeper state. Of the last 10 presidents of the United States, from Harry Truman forward, Dwight Eisenhower to Barack Obama, nobody has been elected president of the United States who finished lower than second in the New Hampshire primary, or won it, either won it or finished second. So maybe history will be broken tonight, and somebody who finishes fourth will go on to be the nominee. But history is a very strong indication that if you don't finish in the top 2 in New Hampshire, you're not going to have an inaugural parade next January 20th. So I think that's what I'm looking for as much as anything.
We've been hearing reporters say they talk to voters who say, well, I'm either going to go Trump or Sanders, or they'll name a Democrat or a Republican. What are we learning in this process about just how unhappy the American people are? Do we better understand the appeal of these outsider?
Well, I think Trump and Sanders, you could say these are very much outsider candidates. I mean, who are politics as usual, Washington, the political establishment. They give cold comfort to members of that group. Or that organization. They are both outsiders. They're both highly critical. I think that is a major thing. Just one point about New Hampshire, Judy. Today they had a snowstorm. They will have a turnout in New Hampshire, if history's our guide again, that will be higher than all but 44 states in November. I mean, and a primary in February. I mean, these are people who take it seriously, take their responsibility seriously, and I mean, they really do a rather remarkable job. So their decision has to be paid attention to, and it will have enormous implications.
And we'll be paying attention. David, you mentioned, we were talking about Trump a minute ago. There's been a lot of coverage today of the remark that he made last night, which everyone has bleeped out, at least all the news organizations have bleeped out, and yet the crowd cheered. What do we learn from that?
Part of his appeal is anti-political correctness. He understands that to show that you're against the establishment, it's not only to show it on positions, you show it on manners. And so, you know, in my view, he's taken the manners of professional wrestling. He's in the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and he's brought it to politics.
We're joined now by Arnie Arnesen, longtime radio and TV host in New Hampshire, Democratic nominee for governor in 1992. She ran for Congress in 1996. Before we talk about the Republican race, let's talk about this historic New Hampshire Democratic primary. You have Senator Bernie Sanders trouncing Hillary Clinton, 60-38. He swept in every category: young people, independents, women. The only two categories he didn't sweep in were senior citizens and families that made more than $200,000 per year. Arnie Arnesen, the significance of this Sanders victory.
First of all, let's also remember that every newspaper in the state, basically a major newspaper, endorsed Hillary Clinton. Every major elected official endorsed Hillary Clinton. This is an earth-shaking moment. It basically sends the message that the establishment is out of touch, that the leaders are out of touch, that there is a sense of frustration, that people feel not only that they're not being heard, Amy, but that the idea of incremental change doesn't fix it anymore. And Bernie's message of campaign finance reform is not actually the term campaign finance reform. You know what it is? It's code for Wall Street. That is the most important thing you need to know. That's what that's about. Since the economic meltdown of 2008, Americans are angry. Both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders tapped into that anger. And not only did they tap into the anger, but they realized who got bailed out? They did. Who is still running in place? They are. What's happening with trade deals? Our jobs are going overseas. It was an amazing turnout, especially in places like the North Country of New Hampshire, which are white, unemployed for the most part, or underemployed workers that Hillary Clinton used to get. That was a place that was a very safe place, in fact, for Republicans and conservatives. You saw enormous voter turnout in those places with working people saying no. Establishment, you haven't heard us. No. Party structures, you haven't heard us. We are ready for the change that Bernie was talking about. And I just think it not only did it resonate, but it had to terrify the Democratic National Committee. They are out of touch, as well as their chosen leaders. But here's the most important thing. Do you know why we're doing this incremental change? Because when you see so much money in politics, what the money interests are doing are not only buying interest, but they are making sure they retard the change. They're holding back the change. That's what they want. They want to make sure it's little tiny steps that they direct. And Bernie says, you know what? Those little tiny steps are not moving us in the right direction in a timely fashion. We must be nimble. We must move forward. You saw that with Bernie Sanders, and in an interesting way, kind of like Donald Trump as well, they tapped into that same vein and desire for something more important and moving us forward.
What the American people are saying, and by the way, I hear this not just from progressives, but from conservatives and from moderates, is that we can no longer continue to have a campaign finance system in which Wall Street and the billionaire class are able to buy elections. what their political view may be, understand that that is not what democracy is about. That is what oligarchy is about. And we will not allow that to continue.
Contributions are about ownership. Let's remind everyone. And what Bernie said is, I want to be owned by the American people. I wanted these to be little contributions. I want it to be the sense that you are all engaged because you all have a piece of the action. What did Hillary Clinton say? Listen, Amy, she wants to get rid of that dark money, that transparent money. She doesn't want to get rid of the big contributions from Wall Street. She just wants to make sure that those big contributions, you actually have to make sure they're done in a transparent manner, but she still likes the contributions with commas in the checks. Notice what she said. Bernie talked about all of us, little contributions. What did Hillary do? She didn't say no to the big contributions, just say no to the super PACs and the dark money. Well, there's more than a problem with the dark money. There's a problem with major people cutting big checks to basically control their access to politicians. Very different speech.
Live here in Manchester with the latest on the Democrats. Let's start there. Molly, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. Well, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders pulled out a huge win here in the Granite State. It wasn't unexpected. He had been leading in the polls, but the margin of victory was really jaw-dropping. He won by more than a 20-point margin. He also won some key demographics. The youth vote, exit polling shows he even won among women. With 93% of the vote in, he got 60%. Clinton, 38%. Sanders has focused on income inequality, on slamming the financial industry, calling for an increase in the minimum wage and free college. The Clinton camp has consistently tried to paint his proposals as unrealistic, but it is clear his message resonated here in New Hampshire.
Thank you, New Hampshire.
We are going to do something so good and so fast and so strong, and the world is going to respect us again.
The wealthiest people and largest corporations in this country will start paying their fair share of taxes.
Congratulations to Bernie. In all fairness, we have to congratulate him. We may not like it.
We must tell the billionaire class and the 1% that they cannot have it all.
He wants to give away our country, folks. He wants to give away. We're not going to let it happen.
We're going to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation.
We're going to rebuild our military. It's going to be so big, so strong, so powerful.
We are going to make public colleges and universities tuition free.
I am going to be the greatest jobs president that God ever created.
Given the enormous crises facing our country, it is just too late for the same old establishment politics.
We have political hacks negotiating our deals for billions and billions and billions of dollars. Not going to happen anymore. We are going now to South Carolina. We're going to win in South Carolina.
Now it's on to Nevada, South Carolina, and beyond.